The colossal alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning, blotting out the stars with their sheer size. The Raltheric, a race of conquerors feared across the galaxy, had finally turned their attention to humanity. Their arrival wasn't heralded by awe or admiration, but by a cold and calculated demand that left no room for negotiation. Submit to the Raltheric Empire. The booming voice echoed across every screen and device, its tone dripping with disdain, or face total annihilation. On the surface of the planet, people froze. Entire cities paused as the message repeated, the alien language automatically translated by the very systems they hacked. The Raltheric fleet hung in the sky like a blade poised to strike, their confidence in their own superiority evident. They had done this before, to countless worlds, and the script was always the same: demand submission, crush resistance, enslave survivors. In a dimly lit war room buried deep beneath the surface of Geneva, Earth's hastily convened Global Council stared at the transmission with a mix of anger and fear. World leaders, military strategists, and scientific experts sat around the circular table, their faces illuminated by holographic displays of the alien ships. The United Nations Secretary-General, Eleanor Kane, slammed her fist on the table. "We can't afford to look weak," she said, her voice sharp and determined. "They've come here assuming we'll kneel. If we give in now, we're signing our death warrant." General Marcus Bell, a towering man with a scar running down his cheek, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Madam Secretary, I've seen their capabilities. Our orbital defenses were disabled in seconds. Their ships are far beyond anything we can match. A head-on confrontation is suicide." "But surrender isn't an option," interjected Dr. Ravi Patel, a physicist renowned for his work in energy weapons. "If we give them the planet, they'll strip it of resources and leave us as nothing more than slaves, or worse." His voice faltered slightly, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. As the debate raged, the alien king, Vorashkar, made his first personal appearance on the broadcast. His face filled the screens, angular and sharp, with eyes that glowed a faint amber. His ornate armor shimmered with gold and obsidian, and his voice carried the authority of a being who had never known defeat. "Humans," he sneered, "you amuse me. Your history is filled with petty wars and meaningless struggles. You are ants fighting over scraps. I offer you the honor of serving the greatest empire in existence. Kneel, and you may live. Resist, and I will reduce your planet to ashes." His words sent a chill through the room. For a moment, there was silence, the weight of the ultimatum pressing down on everyone. Then a voice broke through. "He underestimates us." It was Sarah Monroe, a cyber warfare specialist and one of the youngest members of the council. She leaned back in her chair, her expression defiant. "They think we're divided, weak. That arrogance is their blind spot." General Bell raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we can win this? Did you miss the part where they disabled our defenses without breaking a sweat?" "I'm saying we don't have to fight them on their terms," Sarah replied. "They're used to overwhelming brute force, not ingenuity. Humanity's strength has always been its unpredictability." The room fell silent again as the council members absorbed her words. Kane nodded slowly. "We have 30 days, she said, her voice resolute. "If war is what they want, then we'll give it to them. But on our terms. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." As the council dispersed, preparations for humanity's survival began in earnest. Factories around the globe shifted production to weapons and spacecraft. Scientists worked around the clock to reverse engineer the fragments of alien technology left behind by earlier skirmishes. Hackers, engineers, and military leaders collaborated in ways that hadn't been seen since the darkest days of human history. The looming threat of extinction had united humanity like never before. The alien broadcast continued, each one more condescending than the last. King Vorashkar reveled in his perceived dominance, mocking humanity's attempts to resist. "You scurry like insects, scrambling to build weapons that will only delay the inevitable," he declared in one broadcast, his amber eyes gleaming with amusement. "I will savor the day I see your cities burn." Meanwhile, Sarah Monroe and her team of cyber warfare experts worked in secrecy, probing the alien communication networks. Their goal wasn't just to disrupt the Raltheric systems, but to understand their culture, their weaknesses. What they uncovered was more valuable than they had imagined. The Raltheric, for all their technological superiority, were a deeply hierarchical society. Their king wasn't just a leader, he was a symbol. To the Raltheric, the king was infallible, and his authority was absolute. If that symbol were to fall, the first breakthrough came when a small human fleet, equipped with experimental stealth technology, managed to ambush an alien patrol ship near Mars. It was a calculated risk, and it paid off. The patrol ship was destroyed, but not before its data was extracted. The victory was minor, but it sent a message. Humanity wouldn't go quietly. King Vorashkar's amusement began to wane. "You dare to strike at my forces?" he snarled in a new broadcast. "Your defiance will be your undoing." But humanity was just getting started. Across the globe, propaganda campaigns inspired civilians to contribute to the war effort. Children painted posters with slogans like "Fight for Earth" and "Unite against the Raltheric." Songs and speeches rallied people, turning fear into resolve. The Raltheric had expected submission, but instead, they had awakened a fierce, unyielding resistance. As the 30-day deadline approached, the tension reached its peak. In the war room, Secretary General Kane addressed the council one last time. "The Raltheric think they've seen what we're capable of," she said. "They haven't. Not yet. If this is to be our final stand, we will make it one they'll never forget." The message was clear. Humanity would not kneel. The sleek black shuttle tore through the stratosphere, its thrusters roaring as it entered low orbit. Inside, Captain Eliza Hart clenched her jaw, gripping the armrests of her seat as the small craft hummed with tension. The mission was simple, on paper. Infiltrate an alien communication relay station orbiting the dark side of the moon, download critical intelligence, and retreat undetected. But Eliza knew better than to trust the simplicity of plans. Every second they spent within the Raltheric sensor range was borrowed time, and their margin for error was razor-thin. "Approaching the target," said Lieutenant Connor Vance, the young pilot whose nimble hands danced across the control panel. Eliza glanced at him, her steady presence masking the fact that the entire operation hinged on his ability to fly them out as quickly as he had brought them in. "Keep it quiet," she muttered. Her team of 5 sat tense behind her, outfitted in adaptive camouflage suits, their faces hard with determination. Sarah Monroe was among them, her usual smirk replaced with a grim focus. Eliza had requested Sarah personally. If there was anyone who could breach the Raltheric systems under pressure, it was her. The shuttle glided into position, skimming just outside the station's detection radius. "We're here," Vance whispered. The air inside the cabin seemed to thicken as the team prepared to deploy. Eliza's voice was steady calm. "Remember, we've got 10 minutes tops before their automated systems pick us up. Grab the data and get out. No heroics." The hatch opened with a hiss, and the team floated into the cold void of space. Ahead loomed the alien station, a monstrosity of black metal and pulsing blue energy, its spires extending like jagged claws. The Raltheric had built it to be impenetrable. Humanity was about to prove them wrong. Inside the station's core, the hum of alien machinery was almost deafening. Sarah worked quickly, her gloved fingers flying across her portable interface. "Almost there," she murmured, beads of sweat forming on her brow despite the suit's climate control. Eliza kept her weapon raised, scanning for movement. The station was empty, save for the drones patrolling its corridors, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Got it," Sarah finally said, pulling the data module free. Her voice cracked with triumph. "Coordinates, fleet movements, and oh, this is big. They've got weaknesses in their armor. Structural flaws. We can hit them where it hurts." Before Eliza could respond, the lights around them turned red. A low, ominous siren began to wail. "They know we're here," she hissed. "Move!" The team sprinted through the station, evading drones as they made their way back to the shuttle. The corridors pulsed with blue energy, the walls alive with alien warnings. Eliza's pulse raced, but her voice remained calm. "Stay close. No one gets left behind." They reached the shuttle just as the first wave of drones closed in. Vance fired up the engines, the roar of the thrusters drowning out the sound of weapons fire. The team scrambled aboard, Sarah clutching the data module like a lifeline. The hatch sealed, and the shuttle shot away, dodging incoming fire with precision. As they broke free of the station's gravity, Eliza exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "Good work," she said, her voice laced with relief. "Let's get this to command." The data they retrieved proved to be more valuable than anyone had imagined. In the war room beneath Geneva, Secretary General Eleanor Kane stood before a massive holographic display, her eyes scanning the alien fleet's weaknesses. "This changes everything," she said. "We got a chance now." But even as humanity prepared to exploit this new advantage, the Raltheric escalated their attacks. Their fleet began targeting civilian infrastructure, forcing humanity to split its focus between defense and offense. The alien king, Vorashkar, broadcast another message, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you think you can defeat me with your tricks? I will crush your spirit before I crush your world." Eliza watched the broadcast from the deck of her ship, the Resolute Dawn, a newly outfitted stealth frigate built using salvaged alien tech. The crew was exhausted, their faces pale from weeks of constant battle. She couldn't blame them. The Raltheric weren't just fighting a war. They were waging a campaign of terror. "They're testing us," Sarah said, standing beside her. "Trying to break us before the real fight begins." Eliza nodded, her gaze hard. "Let them try." The next mission was a turning point. Using the data they had stolen, the Resolute Dawn led a coordinated strike against a key Raltheric supply convoy. The battle was brutal, chaotic. Human ships darted between the massive alien vessels, targeting weak points with surgical precision. Explosions lit up the void, and for the first time, the Raltheric were forced to retreat. Back on Earth, the victory was celebrated as a symbol of hope. Crowds cheered in the streets, their fear replaced with determination. But Eliza knew the war was far from over. The Raltheric wouldn't take their losses lightly, and the next battle would be even harder. In the weeks that followed, humanity's strategy shifted. They stopped trying to meet the Raltheric head-on and instead focused on asymmetric warfare. Small, nimble strike teams infiltrated alien installations, sabotaging critical systems. Propaganda campaigns spread misinformation, painting Vorashkar as a tyrant losing control of his empire. The alien king's once unshakable image began to crack. But the cost was high. Every victory came with losses, and Eliza felt the weight of every name added to the casualty lists. She tried to stay strong for her crew, but the strain was beginning to show. In quiet moments, she wondered if they were truly making a difference, or if they were just delaying the inevitable. Then came the message that changed everything. A Raltheric defector, disillusioned with Vorashkar's leadership, reached out to the humans. The defector offered critical intelligence, the location of the alien king's flagship. It was a gamble, but if they could take out Vorashkar, the Raltheric fleet would fall into disarray. Eliza volunteered for the mission without hesitation. "If we're going to end this," she said, "we're going to do it right." Her crew stood with her, their loyalty unshaken despite the odds. They had come too far to turn back now. As the Resolute Dawn prepared to depart, Eliza addressed her crew. "This is it," she said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "We fought harder than anyone thought possible. We've bled, we've sacrificed, and we've proven that humanity doesn't bow to tyrants. Today, we take the fight to them, not for glory, not for revenge, but because this is our home, and no one takes it from us." The crew cheered, their spirits bolstered by her words. The ship launched into the blackness of space, its course set for the heart of the Raltheric fleet. Eliza stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the horizon. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Humanity had a chance, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. The Resolute Dawn emerged from the void, its stealth systems cloaking it from the prying eyes of the Raltheric fleet. Ahead lay the massive flagship, Throne of Dominion, a monstrous vessel that dwarfed anything humanity could muster. It floated in the heart of the fleet, like a spider at the center of its web, surrounded by layers of warships and defensive platforms. The flagship wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, the beating heart of the Raltheric Empire. Taking it down was the ultimate gamble, but if they succeeded, they could shatter the invaders' hold on humanity's fate. Eliza Hart stood on the bridge, her posture rigid, her eyes locked on the holographic display that detailed the fleet's movements. Around her, the crew worked in tense silence, each of them acutely aware of what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. This was the mission, the one that could end the war or seal humanity's doom. Status report, Eliza said, her voice sharp but calm. Stealth systems holding, Sarah Monroe replied, her fingers flying over her console. They haven't spotted us yet, but their patrol patterns are tightening. We'll need to move fast. Lieutenant Vance chimed in from the helm. We've got a 30-second window to get through their outer defenses without being detected. After that, we're out of options. Eliza nodded. Understood. Everyone listen up. She turned to face her crew, her gaze sweeping over their determined faces. We've trained for this. We've sacrificed for this. The Raltheric think they're untouchable, that their king is invincible. Tonight, we prove them wrong. Let's show them what it means to fight for something worth dying for. The ship glided forward, weaving through the intricate web of patrols and sensor grids. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension thick enough to choke on. Eliza clenched her fists, her mind racing through every possible scenario. There was no margin for error. One misstep, and they would be obliterated before they even reached the flagship. They breached the outer defenses, just as Vance had predicted, slipping through the narrow gap in the patrols. The throne of Dominion loomed ahead, its surface bristling with weapons and alien markings that glowed faintly in the darkness. Target acquired, Sarah announced. We're in position to deploy the strike team. Eliza strapped on her helmet, her voice steady as she addressed the team over comms. You all know the plan. In and out, no distractions. We take down their command systems and extract their king. Let's make it count. The boarding pod launched from the Resolute Dawn, hurtling toward the flagship at breakneck speed. It struck the hull with a deafening clang, its breaching mechanism boring into the alien metal. The team poured out, weapons at the ready, moving with practiced precision. The interior of the Throne of Dominion was eerily quiet, the corridors lined with flowing streams of energy that pulsed like veins. Stay sharp, Eliza said, her voice low. We're not alone in here. As if on cue, the first wave of resistance appeared. Raltheric soldiers clad in sleek, insect-like armor, their glowing eyes filled with malice. The firefight erupted in an instant, plasma bolts and bullets tearing through the air. The human team fought with ferocity, their movements a testament to their training and desperation. For every alien that fell, another seemed to take its place, but the humans pressed on, driven by a determination that the Raltheric couldn't comprehend. The team reached the command center, a cavernous chamber dominated by a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with light. Sarah immediately got to work, her fingers a blur as she hacked into the alien systems. This is insane, she muttered. Their encryption is it's alive, almost like it's fighting back. Can you crack it? Eliza demanded, firing a burst at an approaching soldier. I don't have a choice, Sarah shot back. Just buy me time. Minutes felt like hours as the battle raged on. The team held their ground, their ammunition dwindling as the enemy forces continued to pour in. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to give in to fear. They had come too far to fail now. Finally, Sarah let out a triumphant cry. Got it. Their defense grid is down, and oh, you're gonna love this. I've isolated the king's personal quarters. We can take him. Eliza didn't hesitate. Move out. We end this now. The team fought their way to the heart of the ship, the corridors narrowing as they approached their target. The alien resistance grew fiercer, as if the Raltheric could sense what was coming. When they reached the king's chamber, they found themselves face to face with Vorashkar himself. The alien king was even more imposing in person, his towering frame clad in ornate armor that glimmered with otherworldly energy. His eyes burned with hatred as he regarded the intruders. Humans, he sneered, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You dare to defile my sanctum? You are insects unworthy of—" Eliza cut him off with a shot that shattered the silence. The team sprang into action, engaging Vorashkar in a desperate battle. He moved with inhuman speed and strength, his blows shaking the very walls of the chamber. But the humans fought with everything they had, their determination unyielding. In the end, it was Sarah who delivered the final blow. Using the stolen data, she overloaded the king's armor, leaving him vulnerable. Eliza didn't hesitate, driving her blade into his chest. Vorashkar let out a guttural roar, his body collapsing to the floor with a thunderous crash. The silence that followed was deafening. The team stared at the fallen king, their breaths ragged. Eliza lowered her weapon, her expression unreadable. "Secure him," she said. "We're taking him back." As they made their way back to the boarding pod, the ship around them began to tremble. "The fleet's in chaos," Sarah reported, her voice filled with urgency. "They're falling apart without his commands. But we need to move. This place is going to blow." The pod launched just as the throne of Dominion erupted in a massive explosion, the shockwave rippling through the void. On the Resolute Dawn, the crew erupted into cheers as they realized what had happened. The king was dead, and the Raltheric fleet was in disarray. Eliza stood on the bridge, staring out at the chaos they had left behind. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had proven that it wouldn't bow, that it wouldn't break. As the stars stretched out before them, she allowed herself a small, grim smile. They had done the impossible. Now it was time to finish the fight. The streets of Terra burned with a feral intensity, as flames licked the shattered remnants of buildings, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of humanity's uprising. Millions had taken to the streets, a wave of defiance that swept away fear and despair. They carried makeshift weapons, their voices raised in unison as they dragged the captured Raltheric king through the heart of what had once been their city. Vorashkar, bound in chains forged from his own defeated empire's metals, stumbled forward, his towering frame diminished under the weight of humiliation. His once glimmering armor was tarnished, its power nullified by human ingenuity, and his once imposing presence was reduced to a figure of hatred and mockery. The crowd surged around him, their anger palpable, their triumph etched on every face. Eliza Hart watched from a raised platform, her expression grim as she took in the scene. The war was far from over, but this moment was a turning point, a message to the galaxy that humanity would not submit. The Raltheric had underestimated them, had dismissed them as weak and insignificant. And now, their king, the architect of humanity's suffering, was paraded like a trophy through the ruins he had sought to claim. A makeshift tribunal had been erected in the city square, its crude construction a testament to the resourcefulness of a people who refused to be broken. Vorashkar was dragged before it, his chains clanking loudly in the silence that fell over the crowd. Eliza stepped forward, her boots crunching against the debris-strewn ground as she faced the alien monarch. "Vorashkar," she began, her voice carrying over the gathered masses. "You stand before the people you sought to enslave, the people you sought to erase. You called us insects, unworthy of respect or mercy. And yet here we are, standing over the ashes of your pride." The king lifted his head, his glowing eyes burning with defiance despite his predicament. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "My death will only fuel the fires of my empire. You will be crushed under the weight of their vengeance." Eliza met his gaze, unflinching. "Perhaps. Or perhaps your empire will see what we've done here and think twice about underestimating us. Perhaps they'll see that we're not insects. We're survivors. Fighters. And we will not bow." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices a thunderous wave of approval. Vorashkar snarled, his composure slipping as the weight of his situation bore down on him. He was no longer a king. He was a symbol of failure, a warning to those who would dare to challenge humanity's resolve. As the tribunal proceeded, Eliza's mind wandered to the cost of their victory. The Resolute Dawn had returned to a hero's welcome, but its crew was battered and broken. They had lost so many in the fight, their sacrifices etched into the fabric of this moment. Sarah Monroe, her closest friend and the ship's brightest mind, had been critically injured in the final battle. She was recovering, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. Eliza thought of her parents, lost in the initial invasion, and of the countless others who had been taken or killed. This victory was for them, for all the lives stolen by the Raltheric. But it was also for the future, for the generations who would grow up knowing that humanity had faced the abyss and clawed its way back. The tribunal concluded with a sentence that echoed through the square: exile. Vorashkar would be sent to a barren, uninhabitable world, stripped of his power and his name. It was a fate worse than death for a being of his stature, a slow and agonizing end in isolation. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some called for his execution, while others seemed satisfied with the poetic justice of his punishment. Eliza stepped down from the platform, her heart heavy. The War Council had decided that killing Vorashkar would make him a martyr, a rallying point for the Raltheric. Exiling him, on the other hand, would demoralize their enemies, showing them that even their king could be rendered powerless. It was a calculated move, one that left Eliza with a bitter taste in her mouth. As the king was escorted away, the crowd began to disperse, their anger giving way to a tentative hope. Eliza stood at the edge of the square, watching as the fires burned lower, their light casting long shadows over the broken city. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Captain Reyes, the leader of the resistance, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes shining with determination. "You did good, Hart," he said, his voice rough but sincere. "We all did." Eliza nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's not over," she replied. "They'll come for us. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they'll come." Reyes placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "Then we'll be ready. We've shown them what we're capable of. We've shown them that we won't back down." Eliza allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Yeah, we have." The days that followed were a blur of rebuilding and strategizing. The Raltheric fleet was in disarray, their command structure fractured without Vorashkar. Humanity seized the opportunity, launching a series of coordinated strikes to reclaim lost territories and disrupt enemy supply lines. The tide of the war had shifted, but the fight was far from over. Eliza threw herself into the work, her focus unyielding. She led missions, coordinated with resistance cells, and pushed herself to the brink of exhaustion. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would be long and grueling. But she also knew that they had a chance, a real chance, to win. One night, as she stood on the balcony of the resistance headquarters, staring out at the city's slowly healing skyline, Sarah joined her. Her injuries had left her with a limp, but her spirit was unbroken. She leaned against the railing, her gaze thoughtful. "Do you think they'll remember this?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. 100 years from now, do you think they'll remember what we did?" Eliza didn't answer immediately. She looked up at the stars, at the vast expanse of space that had always seemed so indifferent to humanity's struggles. "They'll remember," she said finally. "Not because of the battles we fought or the victories we won, but because we refused to give up. Because we proved that we're more than what they thought we were." Sarah nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Here's to proving them wrong." Eliza raised an imaginary glass, a rare flicker of humor in her expression. "To humanity," she said, "and to whatever comes next." As the night stretched on, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if bearing witness to the resilience of a species that refused to be extinguished. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, but it had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. And as Eliza stood there, her resolve unshaken, she knew one thing for certain: they were just getting started.